General James Amos, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, decided, despite the fact that there had been numerous investigations immediately after the attack, that he needed to open his own investigation. And that led to an interview that I had, that Major General Gregg had, separate events, obviously, but I met with an Army Lieutenant General named Garrett. And this guy asked me the same questions that he asked my boss, despite the fact that we had different roles and responsibilities. And at one point, he had the audacity to ask me, he said, did you ever think to ask for help? All you had to do was ask for help. And I will tell you, I was doing this interview. I was sitting in Hawaii. I was a J5 strategy guy for the Indo-Pacific Command at the time. And I'm doing it via a Zoom call. And I'm out of my chair, holding on my desk, spitting at my computer screen. I was so pissed off. And I won't tell you what I said because it wasn't very pretty, but I will say this. If I'd been in the room with that guy, I would have physically attacked him. I was so pissed off. Unbelievable. We had asked for help time and time again, and we were refused help every single time. So as a result of that investigation, I had a one-on-one with the Commandant, and he asked me to retire. And following tradition of the Marine Corps, I didn't push back. I, gave a salute and said, I got it. And then I retired from Marine Corps about 18 months later. So in May of 2013, General James Amos decided to launch his own investigation, despite the fact that we'd had numerous investigations immediately after the attack, right? Which is the right time to do an investigation because now everything's fresh and it's still there. The evidence is still there. And it's pretty easy to connect the dots. So 8 months after the attack, General Amos, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, decides to launch a new investigation. And I figure at that point, my boss, Major General Gregg, who was the overall commander for Regional Command Southwest, was probably going to take a fall as a result of the investigation. But personally, I felt that I was probably in a pretty good place because I was tucked underneath General Gregg, different roles and responsibilities. Ours was power projection, making sure that we had aircraft and qualified air crew that were ready to go out and deliver air-to-ground munitions, or they were ready to go move troops about the battlefield, do resupply, whatever. And I felt relatively safe. So the biggest mistake I made when that investigation started, I was in the process of, I just arrived in Hawaii to go to work at Indo-PACOM for Admiral Samuel Loeffler, amazing man, one of the smartest people I ever met in my life. What I should have done once I got to Hawaii and I understood there was an investigation taking place, I should have gotten hold of the staff judge advocate that worked for Admiral Loeffler, a Navy captain. And I should have talked to him. I should have consulted a lawyer. I didn't do that. I had never, at that point, I guess I was at the 35-year mark, maybe closer to 36 years of active duty. I'd never been investigated before for anything. And so here I am being investigated. I figure I'm relatively safe. I'm multiple layers below this security piece, different roles and responsibilities. And I got beat up when I answered the questions that Lieutenant General Garrett was asking me. I had someone I was close to actually saw the tape and read the review and all. And, he said, you didn't do yourself any favors. I said, how is that? You said, a number of times you answered, that's not my job. And my response to that individual was, yes, I answered that way because they were asking me the exact same questions they were asking Major General Gregg. They needed to ask me a different set of questions. I had different roles and responsibilities. Did I play an important part in that security posture? Absolutely. But mine was not that overall security. That was different, all right? It was back to what I just said, which was qualified air crew and up aircraft so we could continue to support the forces on the ground. So initially I wasn't overly alarmed, and I will tell you, when I sat down in September of 2013 in front of the computer and the Commandant of the Marine Corps popped up, and said, oh yeah, I hate to do this to you, but you're getting to retire. And oh, by the way, I'm giving you a letter of censure. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, I about fell out of the chair. And you want to know what my initial response was? I was pissed. And I think rightfully so, because as you read through the book, you will quickly realize that there were other people that were responsible, and they didn't start with, they weren't Marine generals. Did we play an important part? Absolutely. And what part did we play? In the end, we were the fall guys, plain and simple. And I got that, okay? The buck stops here at the top. Both General Vergennes and I understood that. But I think if people had taken the time to dig a little bit deeper and actually go back and review that 2011 memorandum of understanding, they would have realized they were pointing their finger in the wrong direction. And if they'd taken time, and it's interesting because in the book, Jeannie actually lays out a lot of evidence that you're looking at going, how could they have come to the conclusion they did based on the facts that you included in your own investigation? Then it makes no sense. So, and I'm a common sense kind of guy. So anyway, that day left me scratching my head. When it was all said and done, like I said, I walked out the door with my head held high. I had a very good conversation with Admiral Locklear because I'm told the conversation with the Commandant was on a Thursday, and I said, well, I'm traveling to Korea tomorrow with Admiral Locklear, and we're going to be meeting up with folks from the Office of Secretary of Defense, and it's going to be a little awkward. He goes, don't worry about it. I'll call Sam. All right, which he did. And Admiral Locklear's, sat down beside me. We were on his plane. We were heading over to Korea. And when he first got on the plane, he walked past me, tapped me on the shoulder, said, good morning, went and took a seat at the back of the plane. We took off. 45 minutes into the flight, and I'm figuring at this point, maybe the Commandant didn't get a hold of him. Well, 45 minutes into the flight, he comes up and sits down beside me and says, hey, I got a call from Jim, and he told me what's going on, and he goes, you got nothing to be ashamed of. Our services hold people to a level of accountability that most organizations don't. You've got nothing to be ashamed of. I better not see you walking around the neighborhood with your chin on your chest. So I live 2 doors down from him on Admiral's Row, 2 doors down. He says, you got nothing to be ashamed of. Boom. All right. And talking about putting me at ease. So we went to Korea. We had a really good visit there. I met the counterparts from the Office of Secretary of Defense that are excited because it was one of the first times I had an opportunity to really interact with them other than via, email exchanges and paperwork. And then really looking forward to working with you. And I'm like, yeah, I look forward to working with you as well. And I could not tell them that my days in the Marine Corps were numbered because the Commandant had not had an opportunity to talk to Major General Vergennes yet and let him know that he was about to suffer the same fate that I just described to you. One of the things that impressed me the most about the Marines' reaction on the night of September the 14th of 2012 was their reaction. Right, in the Marine Corps, we have an adage that says every Marine's a rifleman. And I will tell you, that night it proved to be true, period. And that's one of the things I think that makes the Marine Corps different from some of the other services, right? We focus on infantry tactics. As officers, as second lieutenants in the Marine Corps, much like the Army, they go to the basic course. The Marine Corps has the basic school. We go there for 6 months, and the focus, regardless of what job you're going to do in the Marine Corps, is infantry tactics, right? Because if something were to happen to an infantry platoon commander, I might very well find myself in a position where I have to take over that leadership role, and I've got to be competent in infantry tactics. So that's how officers get trained. On the enlisted side, that every Marine and rifleman piece, it's the same thing. After they come out of boot camp, they go to an infantry training school where they have a better understanding of tactics. So every Marine's a rifleman, regardless of the job they're expected to do in the Marine Corps on a day-to-day basis. And you think about what was going on that flight line. Everybody up and down the flight line that night were all tied to aviation units, all right? They were mechanics. They worked on engines. They were metalsmiths. So they worked on the skin of the aircraft. They were hydraulics men and women. They were fuelers. They were some logistics Marines over there. But everybody, not one person out there, there might have been a few that had an infantry background and transitioned over to the aviation side, as part of a re-enlistment package or something. But they would have been few and far between. So everybody out there on the flight line that night was a Marine that was doing something. They were skilled to do something other than being an infantry Marine. Despite the fact, and because of the training that they'd received at boot camp and the follow-on schools, they knew exactly how to employ their weapons, and they did so masterfully. And in her book, in Jeannie's book, there are 13 people that are interviewed, all right? And it's a snapshot of what was going on up and down the flight line. One of the stories that I never told Jeannie about, and I couldn't tell you, I mean, I didn't tell her one because I didn't know what the kid's name was, but he was a Lance Corporal, so a very junior Marine. And when that fuel farm went up, and it's ablaze, I mean, you cannot miss it. There was a young Lance Corporal who led a number of Pakistanis away from the fuel farm down through a berm down to an area where they were safe, all right? And this was, and you'll read about it in the book, the Pakistanis were third country nationals. They had just come in, and they were in the process of being trained on how to refuel the jets and the helicopters. And can you imagine, here they are in Afghanistan. They've been there for a couple of days, perhaps, maybe weeks. And boom, there's a giant fireball, and they're unarmed, and I'm sure very confused. And there's this Lance Corporal who led them to safety.